Your Excellency, the Minister Delegate in charge of Defense, I pay you my respects. Right Honorable Speaker, if I take the floor, it is not the first time, and on many of these occasions, we have been to draw attention to what we've referred to as the problems of the Northwest and Southwest, but today particularly as concerns the Ministry of Defense. The original question I sent to you, sir, had 4 points on it. The question concerned the prisoners that were arrested in the Northwest and Southwest, their numbers, the treatment that we're giving them, and where they were being held. It concerned the soldiers that were sent to the Northwest and Southwest, not only as at the time when we were expecting that there would have been policing officers, we got military officers. That's the question that was sent to you about a state of occupation, an army of occupation. That was the second point. The third point was about the punishment that would have been meted out to the soldiers who didn't follow your instructions. And the third was the general violence and the climate of violence that was developing in the Northwest and Southwest as a result of the increased military presence and the use of live bullets and so. That was 9 months ago, sir. And with your permission, I would like to bring you up to date because the situation has evolved significantly. And I would count on you, on your indulgence, to bring the House up to date too on these issues because they are current, they are happening today as opposed to what happened 9 months ago. The first situation, sir, is that as of today we are talking, you yourself, you gave us the figure of 84 soldiers that had died as of end of May. We are certain that there are more today. It's a disaster for our own soldiers to be dying in the process of killing their own brothers. As we were losing soldiers, our own estimate is that we have lost more than 2,000 civilians in the process. There's an estimate of about 170 villages that have been wiped out from the face of the globe, in what you call in French, rien ne bouge. It's a scorched earth policy. We have 120,000 refugees. We have counted about 9 camps in Nigeria where they're located. We don't know what your own figures are. And more than 200,000 internally displaced people. Most of us in our houses in Yaoundé, in Douala, Bafoussam, we have received overwhelming numbers of compatriots who are running away from a war zone. What you're seeing, sir, is a genocide that is taking place. At the same time, there are curfews that are being put in. Citizens are being arrested for no reason outside the curfew, and they have to pay significant sums of money, up to 250,000, to the army before they can be released. That, you will tell us more about it. That's in the form of ransoms and everything. We are now entering certain domains because in times of war, you don't know what is fact and what is fiction anymore. The kind of information we are getting, which can only be authenticated from your high officer, is that the French soldiers are already in the Northwest. We saw pictures of some of them. They were coming with dogs to fight. That missiles are being used, surface-to-surface missiles, with a range of anything between 1.5 kilometers to 15 kilometers. A pregnant woman was dead, was shot by one of those missiles. We are told that helicopter gunships are being used, and you know the indiscriminate nature of the killing that can take place when you use a helicopter gunship, just as it happens when you use a missile. We are told that the drones that the Americans gave to be used to fight the Boko Haram are being used for their heat-seeking searches of people that they are being used in the northwest and southwest. Again, it's the domain where I would like you to clarify the public opinion. And at the same time, we're told that chemical weapons are being used. These are all elements of genocide, the numbers and the tactics of warfare. You are in front of the people's representatives, and it is time you tell us what is actually happening. I don't want to go into the economy because it's not in your domain, but as you know, the economy has gone to the dogs. I mean, the northwest and southwest have essentially come to a stop. The domain, one domain which is bothersome, is the domain of health. Because what is happening is that the army has moved into the hospitals and has started threatening the doctors. Any doctor who treats anybody from the war front is the subject of a threat by the army. And the doctors and nurses now are refusing to treat the people. I give you the case of last night in Batibo, where the pharmacy was broken into and 38 million worth of vaccines were destroyed. And right now, people themselves going to the hospital, citizens going to hospitals, they don't have access to the care because the doctors and nurses are afraid of their lives. They are under threat from the army. Sir, this is roughly a sketch of what's going on. I am addressing myself to the Minister of Defense, Minister Delegate of Defense, and the information I have is to the effect that you are one of our finest products from ENAM, therefore one of our finest brains. And in the course of the reflections that we are going to have, one of the reflections we are going to have, sir, is what lessons have we learned from Rwanda? Because after Rwanda, the world said, never again. And here we are now, phenomenon repeating itself. Never again. As I'm talking to you right now, people who were involved are still being arrested to be tried. Again, within the same framework of reflections, what have we learned from Nuremberg, the trials of Nuremberg, about the responsibilities in wartime? The lessons are clear. We have a responsibility to a civilian population, just as we have responsibilities to military, to combatant personnel. International humanitarian law on that is very, very clear. And that is where I'm calling on you to make sure that humanitarian law is being respected, as you know it should be. And I will quote your communication officer who said, we have a professional army. I would like to believe him. And even if they are faulty, you as the key person, you have corrections to make. I see your role, sir. I have never been a Minister of Defense, but I see your role as twofold. The first part of your role is to advise Mr. Biya, because Mr. Biya is commander of the armed forces. He takes the decisions which you must carry out. And you must advise him with these realities. The second part of your responsibility, as I see it, again, I might be wrong. I've never been a Minister of Defense, and believe you me, I don't, it's too difficult for me. But it's the control of your troops, the instructions you give them. The instructions you give them, especially when they are going against Cameroonians. I would like to remind you, if there is a famous war theoretician who said, war is too serious a matter to be left in the sole hands of the army. That's where you and I politicians come in. War is too serious a matter to be left in the sole hands of the army. We must put into the minds of our soldiers the responsibility for life. Obviously, the responsibility for the nation. Yes, but the responsibility for life. That is why I'm talking about responsibility, responsibility, and more responsibility. So, right now you are talking about humanitarian gestures, which a priori would be very good when I see soldiers of the BA going out to hand over help to villages in this area. A priori, it's very good. But what is actually happening? Their first reaction when they see a soldier is to run and hide, because they know. And who is to tell them that these soldiers are not coming to get information during the day to kill them at night? So our first responsibility before we begin any humanitarian gesture is a ceasefire. A ceasefire. I would insist that it be a bilateral ceasefire. Work on getting a ceasefire so that the humanitarian gestures can get into place. While you're doing that, sir, and it's something that is not being done now, we must cultivate the language of peace. You must cultivate the language of peace. Once you begin to refer to some persons as dogs or goats or as secessionists or terrorists, I think they will listen better if you say, my dear brother, let's meet on the table tomorrow to talk. Let me remind you again that it is not a sign of weakness to talk to your brother. Far from it, it's a sign of strength. It is not a sign of strength for a man full of muscles to beat his wife because he has the muscles. It's a sign of weakness. That man with the strength and everything faced with this in front of this woman would have many other techniques of convincing her, and believe you me, those techniques exist. And love is one of them. So, sir, this is the reality of Cameroon as it is today. As I said, I may be wrong, and you have the responsibility of passing the message to your troops. Mr. Biya must begin to talk. He must talk to his brothers. There must be an atmosphere of peace accompanied by a language of peace. If you don't mind, I'll remind you that the last time you were in front of this assembly, there were some rather bellicose words you used. I would pray you, sir, to begin the language of peace. And that said, I would hope that we get to the table very soon so that we can keep Cameroon one where our brothers will not be killing each other. I thank you, Mr. Minister of Defense. I thank you, Right Honorable Speaker, for giving me the floor.